while you're in Chapter 13, you can conceivably start rebuilding your credit. What does it take to rebuild your credit? Well, one little warning here. Be very suspicious of these outfits that say they can repristinate your credit in 2 weeks. That's simply not possible. And you can convince yourself of this by asking yourself, what is the point of credit reports? How much input do you have in their content? Well, you don't have any input. The credit reporting bureaus rely on the creditors for their information, and the creditors rely on the credit reports to determine your credit worthiness if you're applying for a loan or you're applying for credit. And so they depend on accurate information. Now, if you're going to say I can repristinate the credit in 2 weeks, if that were possible, legitimately, that is, there are some scams that people do use. But if you could legitimately do that, do you think Citibank would take your credit report seriously? Of course not. If they knew that you could just wipe the slate with a little bit of bookkeeping legerdemain, they wouldn't take your credit report seriously at all, and yet they take them very seriously. So you're not going to be able to rebuild the credit that way. What you can do, however, is get a couple of the credit cards once you start getting these offers. And if you don't get them while you're in the Chapter 13, which would be a little bit of a surprise, you can certainly get them as soon as you're out of the Chapter 13. The same thing happens in Chapter 7. What I do recommend is getting a couple of the cards. Now, don't start stacking up on the cards, because if you do, then the creditors are going to get skittish and be afraid that you're just going to cash advance on all of them and flee to some other country. In fact, I knew a fellow that did that. He fled to Argentina, and it can be any country that doesn't have an extradition treaty with the United States. He racked up a whole bunch of new debt on credit cards and just left the country. What I would do is get a couple of the cards, and you use them sparingly. Do not treat them as the kid in the candy store. You carry balances of a few hundred, not thousands. You don't pay them off each month. Now, you might think, well, wait a minute, if I'm not paying them off, doesn't that make it look as if I'm irresponsible? Well, let's go back to what I discussed a few minutes ago, the three things creditors care about. If they lend you money, they want their principal back in full. If they lend you money, they want interest on it, and they want predictability. Well, if you pay the balance off, yes, they're getting their principal back in full, but they're not getting the interest. And they want to make a profit. Otherwise, they can take their money and invest it in something else. So if you make the payments and you make more than the minimum payments, that will reassure the creditor, yes, you're getting your principal back in full. If you don't pay it off, then that reassures the creditor, yeah, I'm making my profit off of the interest. And then you make sure those payments are coming on in a couple of days early. Do not wait until the end of the grace period or, oh, well, a couple of days later, and after all, they're going to make a profit off of me by the penalties. Sure, and they'll be happy about that, but you will be viewed as a greater credit risk. So you use those three things. Make the payments early, pay more than the minimum, but don't pay it off. And as you do that, what you're doing is creating a new credit history. And as you develop that new credit history, the old credit history will start to recede off into the mists of time. And when you start this process, what I typically suggest to my clients is open up a bank account. And initially there may be the protestation, well, wait a minute, I already have an account. This is a special account. I like to call it the Eliot Ness account. And apparently nobody knows who Eliot Ness was. He was the fellow who arrested Al Capone. Everybody knows who Al Capone was, the criminal. Nobody knows who the good guy was. Anyway, Eliot Ness was part of a group at the FBI called the Untouchables. And they were called that because they were squeaky clean. They simply could not be bribed. Well, maybe I should call the account the Untouchable account. And each month, you're going to plop in a couple of $100 into that account. And your mindset is, that's not my money. You're not using it for food, for clothing, transportation, utilities. It's off limits. And you keep doing that, and a year later, you've got a down payment on a car. In the meantime, what have you been doing? You've been working those two credit cards and gradually bringing the interest rates down, gradually building up the available balances. And now you go buy that car and you'll get a good deal. You'll get a decent interest rate, a good loan. And because you've got that down payment, you look more attractive. And once you get that car, you make those payments a couple of days early every month. You keep working the two credit cards. You keep plopping money into your Elliott Ness account or your untouchable account. A couple of years later, you've been working towards a down payment on a condo. Now you get the condo. You make those payments a couple of days early, just like clockwork. And over time, we're hoping your income has gone up a bit. So you can keep plopping money into that Elliott Ness account. And after a few more years, you've got a down payment on a standalone house. You can sell the condo, take the equity and plop that into the standalone house. It's a gradual process. And you do have to be realistic. Some people have this idea, well, I've got to have it right now. That might be great in daydreams. This is the real world. And the real world does require some patience. But if you follow that pattern, you generally will do pretty well as far as rebuilding your credit, and you can do it pretty much right away. Now, I will say once you file a Chapter 13, immediately you're not going to be able to do this. It'll take a little bit of time, but again, keep that word patience as sort of a canopy over your thinking.